Welcome back to the Investigator Discussion Series. I'm rather Incoherent, and this is my boy, Harvey Walters. I love this character. Let's get right into it with the stat line. 4 in head and 2 in foot is kind of just good mythos stats. It's nothing particularly impressive. Total of 6, good against head, weak against foot. Not unworkable against foot, not automatically safe on head. This is just one of many versions of alright mythos stats. Seekers sometimes do better, but Seekers have enough tools, and in particular for this stat line, that it's just not going to be something you really have to worry about too much on Harvey. He has absolutely no wasted stat points in Fist and a 5 in Book, which is incredible, and his ability is Reaction. After an investigator at your location draws 1 or more cards from their deck during the investigation phase, that investigator draws 1 card, limit once per round. So most often you just use this on yourself. You use one of your many different abilities from Seeker that are going to draw a card, and then you draw an extra card. You can also let anyone on your team take a draw action next to you, use this ability, they take a second card, and that puts them 2 cards deeper into their deck, which is the same effect on hand size as playing a deep knowledge on yourself. It's not as good at getting into your deck and finding a specific card, but in terms of general value, it is as good as deep knowledge to use a draw action next to Harvey. So this has a lot of team support, even though it very frequently goes on to Harvey. Even in super greedy Harvey decks like I'm very prone to playing, I will almost always, at least once or twice a scenario, be giving this to somebody else, usually towards the start of the scenario. And his star is a great star. It is +1, draw a card. So often I say that draw a card is one of the better stars, and the best stars are unconditional. It doesn't matter if you're doing X or Y, if you succeed or fail, it just happens. This goes off all the time, and it always draws a card. If you get it during the Mythos phase, you sadly will not get to trigger your ability, but if you get it during an Investigate check, then huzzah, your ability's triggered immediately. Maybe you already had it triggered, maybe you don't care, but it does very rarely give you an extra ability trigger that you otherwise would have missed out on. The main thing is, it's just a good star all around. His soak is a 7-8 split. He's up to a total of 15, one more than most investigators because he is a starter set investigator. His deck building rules are deck size 30, seeker cards 0 to 5, that's it. So he gets an extra point of soak, which doesn't quite balance it out, but his stat line is very, very good. His ability is very, very good. And that's why that despite his frankly underwhelming card pool, he's still going to be a fantastic investigator. Seeker 0 to 5 is just disgustingly strong. We're at a point in the game, we've been here for a while, where being a starter deck investigator is not inherently restrictive. It gives you less room to do more creative things, less room to branch out from your class's main identity, but it's not remotely hard to fill a deck with 30 incredible cards from just one class, and especially from Seeker. Harvey's signature is, in my opinion, one of the best signatures in the game. Commits for head, foot, question mark, which you don't want to commit it, but those are basically the best commit icons it could have had. It is a 3-cost slotless asset. It increases your max hand size by 2. This barely matters. There are some decks that care about this. Generally speaking, I don't really value this at all. And there are circumstances where having 8 max hand size and discarding down to 8 is actually valuable. But generally speaking, this is kind of a ribbon feature. The main thing Vault of Knowledge does is after you successfully investigate, exhaust Vault of Knowledge, and choose an investigator at your location, that investigator draws 1 card. So again, you can just use this on yourself, trigger your ability, draw 2 cards, but you can also use this on the bodyguard who's following you around. Give them 2 cards using your ability. You don't even need to use your ability, you can just give 1 card, it's still great. You can use your ability separately if there's a reason to do so. It's just a ton of extra draw and a slotless asset, and these days it's not as impressive as it once was with Empirical Hypothesis existing for all Seekers, but Vault of Knowledge is still very, very good. Coming over to Harvey's signature weakness, it will meaningfully warp the way you play the game at least a little bit. It is Thrice Damned Curiosity, Revelation. For every 3 cards in your hand, take 1 damage. So as long as you haven't increased your max hand size during upkeep, 8's your maximum number of cards, you draw the 9th one, Thrice Damned Curiosity hits you for maximum of 2. If you play Dream Enhancing Serum or other things to increase your hand size, this can just make you explode and kill you. So don't do those things. That's the downside I was talking about with Vault of Knowledge, where this isn't necessarily just a good thing. And even though you're not expecting to take more than 2 damage with this, Harvey's got so much draw, with a draw on his ability, draw on his Vault of Knowledge, able to run a critical mass of Seeker draw cards that allows him to just churn his deck at an alarming pace, that realistically you're expecting this to hit you notably more than 1 time, like at least twice, probably 3 times in many scenarios. So you do need a way to deal with health damage, even though this isn't going to individually blow you up. It still might give you a death by 1,000 cuts if you don't do anything to deal with it. You can also play full tempo Harvey, where you just commit and use everything as soon as you get it. You're all fast events and just high value events and skills, and you never have more than 5 cards in your hand, and Thrice Damned Curiosity is really nothing. I personally don't think that's the best way to build Harvey, and I've gone back and forth on the best way to build Harvey a lot. And as is par for the course of the Harvey discussion, we need to talk about Farsight. This card was printed alongside Harvey Walters for him, and it is incredibly powerful if you can enable it. It is a 2-cost 4 experience arcane asset. You're not committing this, let's not pretend. Lightning Bolt during your turn. If you have 8 or more cards in your hand, exhaust Farsight, play an event from your hand paying its cost. So this turns any action event into a Lightning Bolt event, which is very, very good. There are some things where this dodging opportunity attacks matters, not many. The main thing this does is it is essentially 4 experience, 2-cost arcane slot Leo DeLuca if you can meet the criteria. In the past, I thought Farsight was good, very good, but realistically, I think that was mostly that Harvey was very good and Farsight just happened to be in the deck. And as I looked more and more at it before Hemlock Veil came out, I came to the conclusion that Farsight was asking a little bit too much of me. It was a little bit too awkward to sit right at 8 cards. I would have turns where Farsight was enabled effortlessly. I would also have turns where I was sitting at 5 or 6 cards and really couldn't draw more that turn without meaningfully taking a worse turn. Maintaining 8+ cards in hand is not necessarily that easy, even with a ton of draw. It's not 100% consistent. And I just found that Farsight often didn't hit cards that mattered. I would be using Farsight to play Deep Knowledge or Emergency Cache, things that were good, they gave value, but I didn't necessarily have great ways to capitalize on that value, and I had to add cards to my deck like Extensive Research. And once I'm buying expensive research, it is expensive research, it costs 12 minus hand size, but I'm spending all of these card slots and experience on this stuff, where if I just bought stuff that found clues, I'd have performed at a similar level with less stipulations on how I get to do it. So before Hemlock Veil, I thought Farsight was good, but probably a little bit worse than what you could do with a more traditional Seeker deck. With Hemlock Veil, one very important synergy piece for Farsight has come out. You know him, you hate him, it's the Ravenous Myconid, in particular the Carnivorous Strain. For those unfamiliar, the Carnivorous Strain is a 2-cost 5 experience. He's been tabooed, it totally fixed the card, trust me. It has 1/1 soak, you're not going to be using that though. Research, limited 1 per deck, so you need to get him upgraded by doing special things during your first scenario. And Lightning Bolt, search your bonding cards for Uncanny Growth and add it to your hand. What is Uncanny Growth? Well, it's a 1-cost event that you can play for free with Farsight. It is also an investigate event that gets the clue as normal, meaning this guarantees every turn use Farsight on +1 clue. It's action compression for exactly what you're supposed to be doing now, guaranteed value, very, very strong. Additionally, after this test resolves, place 1 resource on Ravenous Myconid as growth for each point you succeed by and set it aside, out of play. So what do you do with those growths? Lightning Bolt? Because why would you spend actions on anything? Choose a non-elite enemy at your location with equal or fewer remaining health than the amount of growth on Ravenous Myconid, defeat that enemy, remove all growth from Ravenous Myconid. So very rapidly, you can just get Ravenous Myconid up to an amount of growth, usually in 1 action, almost always in 2, where you just eat whatever's at your location. Is it a rat? No problem. Is it a 2-health guy? No problem. Is it Deep 1 Bull? Might take a second Uncanny Growth across 2 turns to eat an entire Deep 1 Bull. So Farsight is just disgustingly better with Ravenous Myconid. Not just that it gives you more actions to build the growths on Ravenous Myconid, not just that it lets you play Uncanny Growth as a fast action in case your Ravenous Myconid is empty and you drew an enemy, so you can investigate in front of the enemy, get the growths, and then eat him without taking an opportunity attack, but also just because Uncanny Growth itself, being a cheap investigate event, is a great thing to spend Farsight on. Additionally, it's not going to be in your hand during upkeep, so it's not going to be taking up space, forcing you to discard other cards, and because of that, it's just easier to get to 8 cards as well, because you're not ever being forced to You're not being forced to discard as much during the upkeep phases, because Uncanny Growth isn't really in your hand. So because of this, the deck I'm going to be showing off today is a Farsight flex deck that flexes entirely with Farsight and 2 other cards for fighting. Ravenous Myconid is one of them, Occult Lexicon is the other. This deck that I'll be showing off is really just the smorgasbord of most fucked up Seeker fighting cards that feel like oppressive design problems. I don't generally think Occult Lexicon is bad for the game anymore. Occult Lexicon is a 2-cost 3 experience hand asset, which is already a pretty substantial investment to be honest. Limit 1 per deck. When you play a copy of Bloodright, either change each 2 to a 3 or shuffle it into your deck instead of discarding it. And then when you put it into play, you put the Bloodrights into your deck, 1 in your hand, 2 in your deck. The Bloodright itself is a 0-cost, draw 2 cards, discard up to 2 cards from your hand. For each card discarded, you may gain 1 resource or spend 1 resource to deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. This does not provoke attacks of opportunity. So Bloodright has a couple of different uses. The most powerful one by far is spend 3 resources, draw 3 cards, discard 3 cards, deal 3 damage, and you do that as a fast action, ideally off of Farsight. You can also use it as economy. You can draw 3, discard 3, gain 3. You can also just use it as draw 3. And if you do any effect with Bloodright, it triggers Harvey's ability as well, so that's always nice. Bloodright's just generally good. The issue is when you're using it to deal damage consistently, spend one resource and discard one card, these start stacking up as you deal more and more damage. You need a lot of draw and a lot of resources to really pay for Bloodright. Harvey, with nothing outside of Seeker to distract him, and a ton of built-in draw, is the sort of character that can easily manage Bloodrights. So the deck I'm showing off today is Farsight Flex Harvey, built around these 3 particularly powerful cards. This is what my core deck for a Flex Farsight Harvey is using these cards. It's only 25 experience. I'm shocked I managed to get it down that low. Occult Lexicon, Farsight, and Ravenous Myconid are obviously here and very important parts of the deck. The rest of the deck is basically just Kluber Harvey, and this is a huge part of why Harvey is so strong. I have 2 cards, because Farsight doesn't really count, committed to Fighting Gods. The entire rest of this deck, 28 cards, a 5-book Seeker, but I'm calling myself a Flex. By the way that I'm fighting, I'll remind you, is Testless. It just kills the guy as a lightning bolt. And if it's an elite enemy, alright, cool. I still won't take the test though, and he's still gonna die, or at least I'm gonna contribute very substantially. For most of the stuff in this deck, it's pretty self-explanatory value, because you're playing high draw and you have a lot of econ demand off of the Bloodright and the constant drip economy going into the Uncanny Growth. Cryptic Writing is just very good. You need it to sort of make up for all the money you expect to lose on Occult Lexicon and Uncanny Growth, and you're drawing enough that this will often be fast. Segment of Onyx might be a little bit strange. It's not necessary in the deck at all, and I have no particular synergy with it. However, I'm not running Pathfinder, so the movement can be good. Guaranteed Evade on elite enemies is just fundamentally broken. It doesn't even show the card that I'm talking about every time. Pendant of the Queen, the reason you play all 3 segments of Onyx to get this card is Guaranteed Evade against elite enemies, which are just broken. It should say non-elite and just doesn't. Teleport's very good because to make my deck fit, to make it have less play actions, less resource demands, and less experience, I don't run Pathfinder. I'll draw my shortcuts enough, it's fine. But that makes the teleport more valuable, and just getting 3 clues is good. But the real reason Segment of Onyx is in the deck at all is because with all this draw, I'll assemble it very quickly, get a lot of value out of it, and then when I'm cycling my deck, it doesn't go back into my deck. Of all my assets, only the second Milan's not going to be going back into my deck. Well, Bulletproof Vest will break sometimes and go back. I suppose I should address the Bulletproof Vest in the room. This is because of your weakness. If you run 1 copy of Bulletproof Vest, your weakness will basically never kill you unless you're drawing over 9 cards very consistently, and that's something you can pilot around and just not do. Bulletproof Vest solves your weakness to physical damage that would otherwise exist due to your signature. And then once you have all of this in play, barring second Milan, your deck's just gonna be 12 events and 8 skills, and they're all very, very good and high tempo. And it's gonna let you play like a very, very effective Kluber who just happens to be eating guys nonstop with Ravenous Myconid. If it's an elite, you'll go ahead and blow it up unless your fighter's willing to do it for you, which he may well because you're Harvey. Usually when a Flex character's fighting, they're not giving up a 5-book Seeker worth of clue finding, but Harvey is. Harvey's very, very strong. This is just a 5-book Seeker playing a Kluber, calling himself Flex by using 2 incredibly broken cards with a particularly powerful synergy piece that he uniquely enables. There is some stuff still worth noting here though. With Harvey's Mythos phase at 4 head and 2 book, Survey the Area is actually insane. His only weakness is his foot test, and this adds 5 foot when you commit it, which is, you know, a lot. It puts you to 7 book. You're not gonna fail the foot test anymore. Because you're gonna draw your deck so quickly, you can realistically expect to draw this for most, if not all, foot treachery tests you will ever take. This is only a 25 experience deck core, and higher education's already here. That 4 head's not bad against the Mythos, but you can just make it guaranteed pass. Additionally, spending resources for +2 to book is effectively spending resources for growths with the Uncanny Growth. So that allows you to guaranteed get the charges you need if something like a Deep Wind Bull pops up and you just ran out of charges on the last turn. Essentially, the reason I think this is the best version of Harvey, I won't be showing off any other Harvey decks today, is because if you're playing Kluber Harvey, you're not giving up a lot of Kluber Harvey to get Farsight, Lexicon, and Ravenous Myconid. It's very little investment for so much killing power. And I considered making other decks to show off other versions of Harvey, but they all have so much in common with this deck. Survey the Area, Shortcut, Practice Makes Perfect, Deduction, Perception, Deep Knowledge, Crack Taste, Brain the Magneto. There are just so many generically really good Seeker events and skills that are going to be in pretty much every Harvey deck because every Harvey deck only has access to Seeker cards and it's kind of hard to get away from them. And since they all have so much overlap, I'm just going to show this one Harvey deck as the thing where I played a shitload of Harvey, and this is far and away the strongest thing I can think of to do with Harvey. Coming down to a starter deck, it looks pretty similar, but notably Ravenous Myconid can't be in the starter deck, so we need to run a lot more things to help deal with enemies. To that end, I'm running I've Got a Plan for damage and Transmogrify for evades, as well as a little bit of clue finding power. This is much better if you have a rogue on your team who can actually evade enemies after you play it, because Harvey won't be doing it. I'm running Survey the Area with my In the Thick of It to be safe to Mythos Scenario 1, and Segment of Onyx is going to actually be a lot of flex utility, because it means I can evade the boss 3 times. It's also just generically good. I've got it planned, and Transmogrify are basically all the cards that weren't in the final deck, so coming over to the upgrade path, what is the most important thing? It's Ravenous Myconid. It's not even close. You gotta get this guy researched in Scenario 1, you wanna upgrade him immediately for 5 experience, it's still completely worth it. Bulletproof Vest is also fairly important. You want this for the soak pretty badly. Ideally, you have an 8 experience Scenario 1 and you can get both. If you can't, I'm probably taking Ravenous Myconid and just taking a second scenario where I'm relatively cautious with my weakness with rapidly cycling my deck, because I know that I really can't afford it. Also, before you have Farsight, it's much easier to play around your weakness. With Farsight, you're trying to hover around 7-8 cards pretty much every turn, but without Farsight, you can just try to stay under 6 cards. It's not that hard to do, and then you're only getting hit for 1, and it's just not that dangerous to not have Bulletproof Vest before you pick up the Farsight, which is why I'm saying that Bulletproof Vest is the second thing you get, and Farsight's the third. Frankly, this upgrade to Occult Lexicon's not a huge deal. You can keep Occult Lexicon level 0 for like half the campaign, and it's not a problem at all. So my priority list goes Ravenous Myconid, then Bulletproof Vest, then Farsight. The rest of this, it's like, what is the rest of this? It's Cryptic Writings, then Occult Lexicon, and Higher Education. That's it. There's not a lot of cards in this deck. Most of them are just individual big cards that cost a lot of experience, except for the ones we're literally starting with. I would say after you get the Farsight, you're looking at what? 3 starting experience, 8, 11, 15 when you get the Farsight, so there's 10 left in the deck. At that point, depending on your team, it's either Occult Lexicon or Higher Education, you're happy to start filling with Cryptic Writings. I would not get Cryptic Writings as an early upgrade. Like, technically you're not increasing your draw, so Cryptic Writings is always going to be the same amount of good until like post that core, because you do want Cryptic Research. So on the one hand, it's not going to get better if you wait to buy it, but on the other hand, I just feel like everything else in the deck is more important than it. I will note Empirical Hypothesis is a card that I really want to fit in the deck. I don't necessarily know that it does fit in the deck. I can't find a way to get it in the deck and be happy with it. As for the cut when you get Cryptic Research, which will happen in pretty much every campaign, that'd be Eureka for me. Eureka's a good card, it's not bad at all, but just using Cryptic Research to draw through your deck faster, which will get you economy, allowing you to pay for Higher Education, or find you Survey the Area, giving you the foot. So, you know, doing all the things that Eureka did, because finding economy gives you the icons for the top 2, and finding your skill is the actual foot icon you cared about. It's better than Eureka. So I think this is the cut for Cryptic Research down the line. And I should also mention Pathfinders here. It's not because I'm planning on putting Pathfinder in the deck, it's because I'm notably not running it. Harvey's going to cycle his deck very quickly. He has 2 copies of Shortcut. I feel like I just get enough movement compression out of the repeated Shortcut cast that I don't need Pathfinder. Additionally, my action compression is mostly in the form of testlessly eating a shitload of enemies with Ravenous Myconid. I don't need Pathfinder for action compression the way some other characters might. So yeah, I just feel like Pathfinder is a play action and 3 resources that I don't necessarily need, and I can trim the deck down by cutting it and achieve a basically identical level of power where my action compression comes from other sources. Coming over to my tier list, I have Harvey as my 4th highest character right at the top of S tier. There are 3 characters above him. Amanda just gets so many clues that it breaks the game. Gloria and Daryl are the best team support characters in the game, and they do it with almost no investment, as well as destroying their roles as respectively a 5-book Seeker Survivor and a 5-head Mystic. Harvey doesn't quite match that level of raw tempo that Amanda has, or the insane amounts of team support from a Daryl or Gloria. But Harvey absolutely obliterates his role as a flex character. As a flex character, I'm like 4 cards off of playing Harvey Walters as a pure Kluver. Pure Kluver Harvey probably still gets into my S tier. Not as high for sure. Maybe low S tier, maybe very high A, but being only a couple cards off of a Kluver that strong, and then testlessly dealing with far more than my share of the enemies as a flex is absolutely disgusting. He is so incredibly strong, the only thing that could stop him is being weak to the Mythos. He's got 4 head, so he's not weak to that side. Higher Education makes him basically invulnerable to that side. He's got 2 foot with 5 book, meaning Survey the Area, which you can start with 2 copies of. It does not work that Practice Makes Perfect. I want to make that clear in case anyone sees this list and uses that. It only works, that effect only happens in your hand, it's unintuitive. So if you get it with Practice Makes Perfect, you get to draw the card, but you get no effect from it. But the point is that that card is putting you at 7 foot. You're cycling your deck fast enough to say that Shortcut is almost Pathfinder. You're going to be able to commit that to almost every foot treachery you get over the entire campaign. So Harvey's stupidly Mythos resilient. He's got +1 additional soak on most characters, so he's not exactly frail. The fact you're building a bulletproof vest to help deal with your weakness is actually a little bit of overkill and makes him more durable than he otherwise might be, not less. He's extremely mythos resistant. And while I'm talking about Harvey like the greediest Scrooge McDuck that ever was, Harvey does have a very powerful support ability that very regularly helps his team more than it helps him, and it does get used that way. Sure, I don't build Harvey to play support. I could build a sick Harvey support deck that would be less strong but very helpful to his team, but even the greedy, all-gas, no-breaks Harvey that I'm talking about today is still a Harvey that can support his team in a very meaningful way and where it is the optimal choice and you do it multiple times a scenario almost always. So is Harvey's team support like anywhere on the level of Gloria or Daryl? No, it's maybe even worse than what Jacqueline is offering. But it's better than the vast majority of team supports in the game to be able to feed your team with this many cards. Like towards scenarios 7 and 8, when you're in the latter half of those scenarios with Cryptic Research in your deck, you're gonna find that you don't wanna play Cryptic Research on yourself. You're like, guys, if I draw 3 cards, I am going to take 3 damage from my weakness. I can just look at my discard pile and tell you this. There's no reason I would play Cryptic Research here, so I'll just give it to you. Harvey Walters will invariably support his team, and the earlier you buy Cryptic Research, the more team support he ends up having because he can't afford to spend all of them on himself. It'll actually end up being detrimental after the first or second deck cycle. So yeah, he's a 5-book Kluver pretending to be a flex character with only 2 cards of the most broken, degenerate methods of fighting in his deck. The only real argument I have against Harvey Walters being this high in S tier is that his Scenario 1 deck is not running Ravenous Myconid and it's not this strong. And that Harvey Walters, despite his incredible draw and how quickly he will draw his deck, running only 2 fight cards and no tutors, he might take a while to find them, like, 3 or 4 turns, not that long. And these are real problems. They do hold Harvey down a little bit. I would say if they didn't exist, I'd have them in my S+ tier. If he started off with like Ravenous Myconid in play, if he had that level of consistency from Scenario 1, if it weren't just something that he's close to, if he actually had that consistency, he'd be an S+. But because he does have to abide by the rules of mortals, unlike Amanda and Gloria, he has to spend XP on the Ravenous Myconid. It's not in his Scenario 1 deck. He has to find the cards in his deck. It does hold him down a little bit. Not very much. I think he's the 4th best character in the game, but it does hold him down a little bit. Your team needs to know that you're playing a flex Harvey, which is to say, if your Kluver's a Mystic, run Spectral Razors. If your Kluver's a Seeker, run Occult Lexicon or I've Got a Plan or something. If your Kluver's a Rogue, run Backstab. Whatever the thing is that your Kluver can do to add a little bit of fighting to their deck that will help against bosses specifically is something they should be doing if you have a flex Harvey, because flex Harvey might take more than 1 turn to find his ways of fighting. He usually doesn't. You're hard mulliganing for these cards and for draw cards that will help you find them, and you're Harvey with extra draw and a deck stacked with draw, so it's not that hard to get to them. But if your Kluver is contributing at all, or your fighter's just able to 3-man fight, if your team knows you're doing this, those potentially tumultuous opening turns are not going to be a problem. And the same solution to that tumultuous opening turn that Harvey can have with a terrible, terrible draw is also the solution to Scenario 1 Harvey. Yeah, Harvey's a lot worse at fighting Scenario 1, but Scenario 1's usually the easiest fight scenario of a game. There are exceptions. So sure, it sucks to not have Ravenous Myconid, but having 2 copies of Transmogrify, having 2 copies of I Got a Plan does a lot of work. Additionally, as I've said, your Kluver should be running something to help with knowing that you have some amount of volatility on that flex. Like, I can come up with nuanced reasons why Harvey is weak, but I look at the reality of every game I've ever had him in and it's just disgusting. And I thought Harvey was gross back when I had him like lower in S tier, when I thought like, oh yeah, he's just a really good Kluver, maybe Farsight's a trap. With Hemlock Vale adding Ravenous Myconid, I think he's just completely broken. Obviously not completely broken. He's just very gross. I don't think he deserves S+, just like Daryl, but I think he is insanely powerful and not at all okay. Anyway, I don't have much more to say on the old man. I love Harvey to bits. His ability is just consistency, and it's the sort of thing I play for. He's a 5-book investigator with good mythos stats. His floor is so damn high just off the bat, and there's so much powerful stuff you can do. You hit a critical mass of draw, you enable a bunch of weird shit like this Farsight flex character. Harvey is very, very strong no matter how you build him, but I think the Tesla's flex, the Tesla's 2-card flex at that, you barely run anything for this role, is just disgustingly strong. If you think I'm overestimating Harvey in some way, I'd love to hear it. If you think I've missed something that somehow brings him even higher in the tier list, I'd also love to hear that. But for now, I'm done. I'd rather Incoherent. Thank you for your time. If you made it this far, then please do hit all the buttons to make the algorithm happy. And a massive thank you to everyone supporting this channel, both as patrons over on Patreon and channel members here on YouTube. I'll see all of you in the next one.